All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. If you can come on over and have a seat, grab a sandwich. Thank you all so much for being here. I think that it's always good to have everyone come out to such a beautiful view, and it's great to be able to meet with all of these different exhibitors here and learn a little bit more about these projects that are proposed around this community. So I'm going to open up. My name is Emma Crow-Willard, and I am with Climate Now. And Climate Now is a multimedia educational resource for anyone interested in learning about different climate solutions. We create videos, we have a podcast, and we also do events to help engage people around different climate solutions. And so the one today that we're talking about, of course, is carbon management. So you guys will get to hear all about that. And also we can bring up more chairs if needed. There's also some seats here, a few chairs here and there. So please come find me if you need a chair or anything. Don't hesitate. So I just want to say that if anyone needs translation to another language, you can scan it here. So that is an option. Please do, and then you can follow along on the transcript. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce Fred Jackson to open us up. He is from the county judge's office, from Judge Jeff Brannick's office, and we had a member of Judge Brannick's office on our planning team, and so with that, I will hand it over to Fred.
Well, I appreciate the invitation to be here. Judge Brannick is running crazy with the legislative session and so many other places. I'm going to try to stand in here, but I want to welcome everybody here. The county, and I'm speaking for Judge Brannick and the Commissioners Court. We had two commissioners stop by earlier, but we're all interested in learning about this project, the prospect of capturing carbon dioxide and trapping it, improving our air quality and our environment. And I'm here to listen and learn. I'm going to report back to the court. I had the pleasure of meeting Tracy Benson with Lamar. He's going to supply me with some additional information. And as I put it, he's been neck deep in this for about 10 years or more. But we have a good working relationship with Lamar, good partnership in various departments. They're helping us with our flood control and a number of other things with the Resiliency Center. And the court is interested in diversity of investment in this county, okay, as long as it can be done safely and economically. So I'm here to gather as much information along with you to see how this is done, how it's done safely, and to assure everyone that we're not going to face some terrible consequences down the road if they start injecting. We've been storing various chemicals and products in caverns for a number of years, and it's been done safely. From the bit I've studied and learned, we have ideal conditions here, but I don't pretend to be a geologist or have any depth of understanding in that area. We want to use the resources we have in a way that's going to be beneficial to everybody. So along with you, I'm going to sit and listen to people that are way smarter than I am tell us about this type of project, and then listen to the questions that are going to be asked. But I appreciate being with you, and if anybody ever needs anybody from the county judge's office, I'll give you my contact information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would now like to introduce our symposium moderator, Emmanuel Taylor.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right. Hello. How's everyone doing today? Okay. Awesome. Great to see everybody. My name is Emmanuel. I'm going to be moderating today. Just a note, I'm not with any particular government agency or project development team. My goal here today is to help to make sure that the conversations that we have are fair and balanced and that everybody has an opportunity to be a part of the discussion. A couple of things that I think are worth noting quickly. One is that the event is being recorded. So we want everybody to be aware of that. Also, when it comes to the audio today, we're going to try to use the microphones as much as possible. I've been told that that's the way that the audio reflects on the recording. And so although we're not in the largest space, and I'm sure we could all hear each other if we just spoke like this, we do want to make sure that it comes out in the recording. All good? Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to go through just a few slides to kick us off. So meeting purpose, intended outcome. So this event was organized for a number of different reasons. So one is to provide everybody with an opportunity to learn more about different carbon management strategies, techniques, technologies, approaches, and to better understand some of the activities that are happening or anticipated to happen in the region. Another purpose for the event is to be able to ask questions and to dialogue with one another and to be able to hear perspectives and to get clarification on things, right? And so that's one of the big reasons that we're here today, is to be able to share information and to learn from one another. There are opportunities after this event to continue to be engaged in the way that potential projects could unfold and all of the activities in the region. And so we're going to be exploring some of those opportunities during this conversation here today as well. And just really to hear and to learn more from each other. I'll also say that there is room for unintended outcomes from the meeting as well, right? So we try to predict as much as possible and to organize and to create a good agenda. But we also want to leave room for everybody to get what they need out of the conversation as well. And so we'll talk a bit about that. I do want to start just by discussing some key principles for conversation, just sort of setting some baseline expectations, right? So one, I just want to start with respect and recognizing this as a community of peers, right? So regardless of the experience or the expertise, it doesn't matter what initials you have before or after your name, right? We all have experience that contributes to this particular conversation. Some of you are experts in the community that you live in. Some of you are experts in what's happening 7 miles underneath it, right? But we all have relevant things to bring to the conversation. And for that reason, all of our perspectives are important. So as much as possible, we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to have a voice in the conversation and that nobody in particular is dominating the discussion, right? Because we all have something that's important to share. Our perspectives matter. We're all bringing something unique from our experience, and that's welcome in this conversation. Now, these last three, we only have so much time here together today, right? And so there's a lot that we're going to talk about, but I'm sure there's still going to be lasting questions or things that still need to be resolved even after this particular conversation ends. And so we want to be committed to following up, right, and making the best use of the time that we can. Does that all make sense? Great. Yeah, because I know that in conversations like this, there's so much to talk about, but we only have so much time. So as much as possible, we want to try to connect people, right? That's one of the outcomes that we're looking for. If you have a question, there's somebody who can help to inform that. We want to make sure that you get connected today so that that follow-up can happen. Okay? Make sense? Awesome. Let's see, a couple different ways to participate today. So we're going to have presentations, but we're also going to have Q&A. There'll be some panels. And even after the planned agenda is over, my understanding is this space still stays open for about 35, 40 minutes or so. And we want to make sure that even after the formal agenda has ended, there's an opportunity for folks to still break off, have smaller discussions, still continue to talk about the things that are important to you. Okay. A couple of different ground rules. We do want to try to keep things constructive. So by that, I mean like no personal attacks, you know. You may think my haircut is ridiculous, but it may not be relevant to the conversation at hand, right? So we're just going to try to keep things constructive keep things respectful. Is everybody okay with that? All right. Anybody have an issue with that? All right. I appreciate that. We're going to try to be as concise as possible as well, just recognizing that the more time that we take, the less time other people have to be a part of the conversation as well. So in that regard, we're going to try to keep remarks concise. Everything else, pretty much well understood. One thing that we do recognize, though, is that we don't all know everything. And so if there's something that you don't understand, it's okay to just say, hey, can you please clarify that? Or if somebody starts speaking in terms that aren't familiar or using acronyms or anything else like that, we do want to make sure that we're all on the same page. And that can only happen if we ask those clarifying questions when necessary. Okay? This all sound good?
Yep.
All right. Fantastic. And we have a couple mechanisms for networking. Around the room, you may notice, I know there's one at the front, but there are different places to just write down questions that you may have and document that. There's paper on the tables as well, note cards in the middle. If you have questions at any point in time, I do recommend just writing them down. If you don't feel comfortable asking a question during the Q&A, you can always pass that slip of paper to somebody who's walking around with a microphone. And we're going to try to answer as many questions, but even documenting those means that they're not forgotten, and we can follow up on them later, even if we don't get a chance to talk about them now. Sound good? All right. Awesome. All right, then without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Susan Havarka, who holds a PhD in geology and has over 25 years of research experience testing the effectiveness of geological storage, including 8 different field test sites that have been used to evaluate many different aspects of storage. So Susan is going to be speaking from her experience today. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. Thank you all for coming. This is a nice turnout, nice place. Thank you for being here. I loved being here. We did the first CO2 injection experiment in Dayton, Liberty, just down the road here. So I was driving by on the way here from Austin. It was extremely cool. I'm from UT. Did I say we say I'm at UT? I wear a UT shirt so that I'm disclosed. So I've been working on CCS since the 90s. I used to be kind of a skeptic. I wondered if this tech was really needed, if climate change was really real, if it would be protecting old water, if we would have if we had enough control, enough knowledge, if we had enough regulations. And over the years, if it would harm water, over the years I've become not able to be as much a skeptic as I used to be. I can do a good line of skepticism. It's what researchers do, is ask questions. So I may sound like a bit like an advocate, but it comes of 25 years of, I would like you to, I would like more. I would like you to, all right. I would like you, I'm not a very loudmouth person. I would like you to help you catch up with what I've learned in 25 years of working on this tech, so that you can ask intelligent questions and think about it right. I think about it as with what I know. So this is a picture of a project in outside of Houston in Sugar Land that captured 3 million tons of CO2 and sent it, and we did the monitoring to show that it was retained. I could talk to you for hours about what we did, but the answer was yes, it was retained. It did what it was supposed to do and stayed where it was supposed to stay. So the question here is what to do about CO2. This is my setup slide. This is what's been happening to the amount of CO2, not the total amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, just the amount we're releasing. It's going up and up and up. And if we don't do anything, one might predict something like this, which is hazardous in many ways. What the people who study the impact of the CO2 in the atmosphere tell us is that if we want to have the temperature increase by only 2 degrees centigrade, that's a lot more. It's more in Fahrenheit. So if we're going to, in order to keep it from getting average global temperature hotter, we need to bring the CO2 we emit down on the blue line. If we want to reduce the amount of heat in the average heat in the atmosphere we experience to 1.5, which is considered safer now, we need to do it a lot more. So what do we do? There's a lot of things we can do, and this is not a complete list. We can do efficiency. Efficiency is everybody's favorite. We could do solar. We could do wind. We could do batteries. Some of these things overlap. These are you pick. I'm not telling you how much you should do or how much we should do or anybody. These are things that can be done, are being done. They intersect. Electrification intersects with the batteries, intersects with wind and solar. You can make hydrogen as a fuel carrier rather than using fossil-based fuel, or you can turn hydrogen. You can do all kinds of things with hydrogen. You could make a bunch of things out of, and I'm not going to go into it, biofuels, synfuels, products. Or you can do carbon capture and storage, which is what I'm going to talk about, this option. There are many, many other options. If I didn't list your favorite one, I'm sorry. There are many options. If you think the geometry should be different, yes, each jurisdiction, there are hundreds of these on the internet. I just drew them on PowerPoint as a illustration rather than the answer. If you want to get down to 1.5 degrees increase in temperature, then you need to remove CO2 from the air that's already going up. So these are called removals, and there's a lot of technologies. Several of these intersect with carbon capture and storage. For example, hydrogen intersects with carbon capture and storage. Removal of CO2 from air does. So a lot of alternate fuels also do. So some of these, they all entangle with each other in a complex array. I'm going to talk now about the thing that's happening here, which is carbon capture and storage, called CCS for short. I'll tell you what it is. Why am I going to talk about this? 3 reasons. One, I was asked to. 2, it's what I know something about. The others, I don't know much about. They're good. I have solar on my house. It's good. I like it, but I don't know much about it technically. But I do know a lot about carbon capture and storage. And the third thing is it's become a hot issue here. Why here? So it's relevant. It's something people can do. Industries here, communities here can do this. Other places like Minnesota, they can't do it. They don't have the subsurface. They don't have the chemical industry. They can't do it. So it's a option here that's not available to others. So what the heck is it? So we have emissions. They're going up in the air. They go everywhere. It's not like criterion pollutants that are local. They are everybody. So what they do in Minnesota impacts us. What we do here impacts Minnesota. And we don't want this. So we capture the CO2, we separate it from other gases because we don't want to inject air underground. It's expensive, and energy, it's not a good idea, energy-wise. It's compressed and transported either by a pipeline or ship, or anything else you want to transport it by. And it's injected deep, it's injected back to where it came from, deep underground, into rocks that are selected and permitted. You can't do it everywhere. That's one reason why these are happening here, is because these rocks have been selected, can be permitted, have been permitted for deep well injection. We know it works here. The CO2 is permanently stored, but beneath many layers of rocks. How do we know that there's? I'll tell you in a minute why they're, and between the rock grains. So this is where it goes. It's not into a cavern. We're talking about the storage of product in caverns here, and some of the benefits, also the hazard. It comes out, it goes in easily, but those salt caverns have had problems. This is between rock grains, so it's a lot more permanent. So, and this cartoon, those are so how do we know it will stay underground? Because it's buoyant. It could, and its low viscosity is runny. So how do we know what we put down stays down? It's because it's under a lot of rock layers. So if you come over to our table, we can unfold a log and show you how deep it is. It's a long way down, a mile, through many, many rock layers. And its second thing is it's stuck in between the grains of that are down there. It's not in a cavern. It's stuck between grains. This is really important. It's a kind of physics that most people don't really talk about, how things get stuck in small spaces. But that's why when when things go in small spaces, they get stuck in a way that they don't in bigger spaces. So that it's hard it's called hysteresis. One way it goes one fat in and it won't come out. Come visit us if you want to talk more about the stuckness at a pore scale. The third thing that gives you confidence is that state and federal regulators require permits and monitoring and reporting that it's all working as planned. I know some of you are interested in watching to see if this is done correctly. Please do. This is we have the rules in place to watch over these projects. They're very mature. My colleague Angela, who's here, did a study of how this works for some of the hazardous materials that are objected up and down the Gulf Coast. And if you want to talk to Angela about how this works, please come talk to her. She'll tell you what she found in her thesis. What is the answer?
Thing.
Did it work?
Yes, nothing really happens.
Come talk to Angela about the details. She looked at 90 wells and up and down the coast to see how the regulators are doing it. So we do have regulations in place. This is not the Wild West. This is a very mature, well-regulated kind of activity that's been successful. We may argue about where it's failed. We can talk about that for sure. So it's a global technology. It's not just here. The first project was in Norway, and it's been running since 1996. I could tell you more about that. It's called after the Schleipner, after the eight-legged horse of Odin. And there are clusters of projects in the Gulf Coast. They're all over the U.S., but they're especially focused here because there's opportunities here, both in terms of the geology and in the terms of the sources of CO2. So let's look at what's right here. This is from public sources that is much better if I hold it right there, right? The public sources so that there's gossip about a few more. I warn you that not all of these will come into fruition, and not all of them, and there are certainly others that are in discussion that are on this map. But it gives you an idea. What you're seeing here in the dots are the places where CO2 it's been announced that the plant owner and a consortium are going to do capture of CO2 for one method or another, from one source or another. The squares are areas where acreage is being leased and permitted and characterized to store the CO2. And the open circles, the green ones, are places that emissions are happening. If you don't see a small circle in it, there's nobody announced a plan. Some of them may be talking about things. Those are unabated. That's where CO2 is going up in the air and nobody's announced a plan to capture it. So there's a problem here about the amount of CO2 going up in the air, and those red ones are part of the proposed solution. So people worry about this. I worry about this. So what are some of the common worries that we hear most? And I'm going to give a short list. Come talk to me about anything else you want to talk about. Will we have earthquakes? Or will all the CO2 come out like it did in African Lake in Cameroon, Lake Nyos? And the answer is no. These two questions, no for sure, flat no. The rocks here, you'll hear about earthquakes from deep well injection, but the rocks here bend. They don't break with violence. How do you know that? You've probably had experience with what we have here. If you're going on vacation in the Rocky Mountains and you hit the rocks, you hear a nice ringing sound. That energy is the kind of energy that makes an earthquake that can be felt and is dangerous. That transmits the energy. If you go out and hit the ground here with a hammer, no transmission. So there's a lot of energy, a lot of fluid stored in the deep subsurface here. No seismicity. I put a citation if you want to look it up. It's my colleagues collect data. It's not a thing that happens here that you guys need to worry about here. Other people do need to worry about it other places, but not here. The second thing is we have this vision of CO2 coming out and killing you in the night, which is what happened in this incident of volcanic crater in Africa at a deep lake overturned and killed people. Is very dangerous. So people have this nightmare that it will happen here. There aren't any volcanic craters with deep lakes. That kind of hazard is not something we have to worry about here. So this is not. Don't imagine that. Whoops. So here's some other things that you do have my permission to worry about. But let me qualify them a little bit so you can worry about them a little more accurately. Will pipelines blow up? Well, CO2 doesn't explode. It can't catch on fire. So it's unlike the pipelines you most read about where it's explosions and people are incinerated, and it's very dangerous. I've been in places where there were pipeline explosions. It's scary. CO2 doesn't do that. But if you break the pipeline, it can be released violently. Sometimes when we do a field test and people come out to visit, we open the open, it's also quiet and birds are chirping and stuff. And there's no people say, why'd I drive all the way out to see nothing? And you say, something's happening, it's going through. So we open the pipeline. Let me tell you what happens. It roars. You cracked open the pipeline to let it come out. It roars. It's loud. And people get out their cameras. We make them put on hearing protection first, so that it's so loud. And it comes out with energy. We make people not stand in front of it because it shoots dry ice out at you. You don't want to be hit by little pellets of dry ice, snow. And it makes a cloud of water vapor, the moisture in the air. It's cold, condenses. So you see this. It's dramatic. And it hugs the ground. If it goes down on the ground, it's heavier than air. So that's what happens. We'll hear more from PHMSA about pipeline safety. I'm not a pipeline expert, but I wanted to tell you what happens when CO2 comes out. How about lots of old wells near here? Some of them have a bad reputation. So the operator must prove that all the wells are properly constructed, managed, or plugged before injection can begin. This is a good thing for people who live near a CO2 project to discuss with their operator and their regulator what's been done about the legacy wells. It's something that's in the cookbook. It's in the Safe Drinking Water Act 1974. Everybody has to do this. So they should be completely ready to discuss this in full detail about the old well. So let me show you how to discuss the old well with some people. So the well, this is how wells are supposed to keep zonal isolation, we call it, keep fluids from one zone, which is the deep injection, from coming up and bothering people in either the drinking water or at the surface. So they're constructed with a surface casing that's keep fluids, the different zones isolated. First, you drill through the fresh water and cement that off so that it can't be damaged by deeper fluids or by drilling. And then you put in one or more long string casings that go down to the depth, cement them in. If it's an injection well, it's cemented all the way. I drew you a problem well. This is an old well that was drilled for another purpose, oil and gas or exploration, and it would only be cemented at the bottom. So this is another thing that can be investigated, is how much cement has been placed. At the end of its life, it's supposed to, during its operation, it's supposed to be checked. The operator has to run what they call mechanical integrity tests. They have to check and see if the steel is still in good shape, if it's all operating, if fluids are not allowed to come out. If they are, it's a mistake. There's penalty. At the end of the well's life, it's supposed to be plugged. You're supposed to put the plugs in different zones depending on exactly what jurisdiction it's in. But they're supposed to isolate one zone from another zone and permanently seal up the well. So what do you ask about? What can go wrong? So the well could have not been constructed per this rule originally, or over time the well could be damaged. The operator is going to have to do what's called a corrective action in the jargon. They have to go out and fix the thing, or else they can't do the project. And they have to convince you in public. They have to convince you that they've done it. It might not be cased and cemented to modern standards, so then this can be negotiated. Like, will we be required to bring it up to modern standards? It might, if it's not maintained, it can degrade at the end of use. So you have to leaving them idle is hazardous for them. Somebody needs to get in and fix them. If they're old, they're a problem to get in. And it could be not plugged or not plugged correctly for the zones that are going to be energized. So you can discuss all this and how they're going to do it, who's going to do it, and what hours they're going to work, and what the haul routes are, and all those details are very relevant things that would de-risk a project in this area. So it's required by law, it's required by permit, but it has to be exposed in the public, and you get a right to go find out about it. If anybody needs any more information, I'm delighted to answer questions now over there or in the future.
I would like out. You had some figures on. I'm sorry. You had some figures on temperature change and the carbon has been released. Were those U.S. figures or worldwide figures?
The figure I showed you is a global figure. Yeah. There's a tremendous amount of information, and to be honest, I'm not a climate change expert. I read the same places you do, and if you would like more information about climate change in general, I'm glad to send you to experts as best I can.
You answered it. Thank you.
Any other questions for Sue?
Yeah.
Hi, Sue. You said that there's not a risk of seismicity here, that the rocks bend, they don't break. What about subsidence and uplift that could maybe impact like a foundation of a house or something like that?
Yeah, here there will be subsidence. There has been subsidence in the like Houston groundwater withdrawal. The groundwater withdrawal in Houston is from shallow depths. You remember in my diagram, it's up at the groundwater comes out at 1,000 feet or thereabouts, and then we're talking about injecting maybe 5 times deeper for most of these projects. So it's attenuated, the impact of, and here you're going to lift it up. We had some discussions in Louisiana for a while with the Secretary of State who thought maybe you could pump up Louisiana and keep it, emergent. And we decided that that probably technically was a kind of a reach, but there is a measurable impact. I've heard people talk about maybe the impacts in areas with very sensitive drainage. In this case, it's going up, which is in general not as bad as going down, and it's millimeters, but it's not zero. So one could do assessment and see what its impact would be on. We have some data. We did a test in near Alvin. If you want to know what happened in Alvin, I have some evidence of what happened. It was millimeters. We could kind of pick it out. The groundwater was much more dynamic. What you see in the seasonality of groundwater is what will change your foundations, not the deeper injection, but it's not zero.
Any other question? What? Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
That's it.
All right. So I do want to just quickly recognize we are just a bit behind schedule. And so forgot to give some guidance just for presenters. No, it's fine. It's totally fine. I'm going to be sitting right there in the front. When you hit 2 minutes left in your presentation, I will raise 2 fingers. When you hit 1 minute left, I will raise 1 finger. If I stand up, that means that you are out of time, okay? Because what we don't want to do is just have the presentations and squeeze the Q&A to make room for all of the presentations. We want to make sure that we have enough time to just address all of the questions in the room, okay? All good? All right, so we're going to be moving to the next portion of our agenda, and this is going to be our discussion on safety, preparedness, and emergency response. We have a couple of different subtopics within this particular part of the conversation, and the first is going to be on air quality. We have 2 speakers, Tracy Benson and Sarah Hamilton. First, we're going to hear from Tracy Benson from Lamar University, who's going to be speaking a bit about air quality. So thanks so much for being here with us today.
I grab one of these others. Sure. Look one you didn't have to have it so close to your mouth. This one? That's good? Fantastic. All right, so I serve as the Department Chair of Chemical Engineering here at Lamar University, and I'll start by telling you that I moved here about 15 years ago, and when I told people that I was moving to Beaumont, Texas, you know what they said? It stinks there. Why would you move there? It stinks there. And I moved here, and guess what? It didn't stink. Right? And I'm going to hopefully give you a little reason why. Talk about the air quality here. Most of it is has to do with a lot of particulate matter. If you live, I grew up out in the country where there was a lot of farmland and gravel roads, and so you have a lot of dust, and so that's large particulate matter around the 10 micron. Now, what's a micron? If you take a meter, which is a little bit more than a yard, and you chop it up into 1,000 pieces, that makes a millimeter. If you take that millimeter, that one tiny millimeter, and you chop it into 1,000 pieces, that's a micrometer, also known as a micron. So tiny pieces that a micron we can't see with our naked eye, but you string enough of them together and you can start to see them. So the larger particles are in the 10 micron, construction sites, gravel roads, farm fields, even smokestacks. The things that we tend to be more conscious about are the smaller, the 2.5 particulate matter, 2.5 microns, that it's those nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides. Those were the things that were causing the stench and other things that were being emitted. And over time, through regulation, through industry getting better at doing at being environmentally conscious, we've cleaned up our act quite a bit, right? So power plants, industries, automobiles, these things, they're still emissions, right? It's not zero. And these things tend to cause, health effects that are respiratory, pulmonary, asthma, and, kind of issues like that. Environmental effects, things like acid rain, some of those things we don't hear much about anymore. So the air quality index is how we tend to measure things. And you'll see here, you got the green, the yellow, the orange, red, purple, deep red. And this on the right here is a snapshot of Beaumont. I think I did that particular one last week. So you'll see that we were in the moderate zone, looking at the particulate matter, and that 2.5. And then here you'll see that, and you can go to airnow.gov, and you can see where the sensors are here in Southeast Texas. And then there's an interactive map that you can see. Okay, you can zoom in and zoom out to see where certain regions are, and even through you can see it over a course of a month. This is from the end of August through towards the end of September. You'll see that it's about 50-50. We had about 15 days that were in the green and about 15 days that were in the moderate. Nothing in that, at least in that time period, that was worse than that. And if you're on the bottom here, you can see what different ozone, which is not something that's an issue in our area. Carbon monoxide, or sulfur dioxides, nitrogen oxides, and the particulate matter. So you can get some of this information through the EPA websites. You can also do it through the TCEQ website as well. This one here comes from TCEQ, which gets through a lot of that information through the EPA. And oftentimes the picture on the right, if you live in the Southeast Texas area, you go by lots of plants and you see things coming out the stacks, and it will look similar to what you see in that picture. Oftentimes what you're seeing is steam, and and with that can be some of these other low contaminants, but it will also a lot of times also be CO2 as well. And that's my talk. Questions?
We're gonna hold questions. We'll have our next presenter, and then we'll do a Q&A with both of you, if you don't mind. Okay, awesome. I appreciate it, and happy to welcome Sarah Hamilton, who is a Science and Technology and Policy Fellow at DOE's Carbon Management Program, is going to share some more perspectives and some exciting findings from our research. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. This is my first time in this part of Texas, so I'm really excited to learn about what you think here in the local community about some of the stuff we're working on at DOE. So I'll be sharing some information on the work we've been doing at the Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management at the U.S. Department of Energy to understand the air quality impacts of carbon capture. So, Okay, a little bit about me. I'm a scientist and an engineer. I've been working on carbon management since my PhD. Here are some pictures of me working on carbon capture materials in the lab and visiting different carbon capture projects around the world. Outside of work, I'm a lover of the outdoors, and part of the reason why I work in carbon management is that I think it's a crucial technology to protect the beauty of the world around us from climate change. Okay, so carbon management. Our office supports research, development, and demonstration of carbon management technologies. And when we say carbon management, we're really referring to a system of technologies that captures carbon dioxide and permanently stores it. So this includes carbon capture here on the left, either from a point source or from the air, carbon transport, and then geological storage, which Sue told us a lot about, as well as carbon conversion. So different divisions in the office I work in cover different parts of this map. But today I'm specifically going to be talking about point source carbon capture. Now, we've been working on point source capture at the Department of Energy for quite some time. The program initially started working on understanding materials for carbon capture, doing a lot of work in the lab, and trying to improve properties of carbon capture technology and make it more economical. Since then, we've moved to scaling up some of these carbon capture technologies and also leveraging some of these learnings from early on to understand how we can apply carbon capture to different industries, including the power sector, industrial sector, and for capturing CO2 out of the air. And we're also interested in understanding the implications of deploying carbon capture, including on air quality impacts and possible co-benefits in that area. So what do we mean when we say co-benefits on air quality related to carbon capture? So if we look at a point source facility that's emitting CO2, when we introduce this carbon capture process, we are essentially capturing CO2 that was produced from that facility in a carbon capture system. So our main goal here is to capture carbon dioxide. But these systems also have a polishing system, and this is shown here in this green box, that can capture other co-pollutants, like the ones that Tracy told us about, SOx, NOx, particulate matter. And that can improve local air qualities in the places where these carbon capture facilities are deployed. So these improvements are not going to be the same across different facilities and projects. They will vary depending on whether carbon capture is deployed on a power generation facility or a cement plant. So we're really trying to understand how these vary across different locations by asking all of our DOE-funded pilot projects, as well as our National Carbon Capture Center, to measure these changes in co-pollutants that will arise as we implement carbon capture in these places. All these data will be made publicly available in a carbon management portal that we have developed at FECM. So I encourage you to take a look at this portal, and we'll be posting information related to air quality here, as well as other studies that have evaluated the impacts of carbon capture on local air quality. So definitely take a look at this whenever you have a chance. So another thing that we're looking into in the carbon capture program at DOE is the impact of possible non-CO2 emissions that will arise from the carbon capture materials that we use in these processes. So these solvents that we use for carbon capture, they can break down and degrade over time. And it's important for us to understand what other emissions can come from these processes. So we're doing work at DOE to measure, manage, and avoid these types of other air emissions. Just to give you some examples of work we're doing in this space. First, we're supporting research and development on carbon capture technologies that will minimize these types of secondary emissions. We're also developing engineering controls that our projects will implement to minimize any types of possible emissions into the atmosphere. And this last one I'm actually really excited about. I've been working on this for the last year. We're working with scientists at various national labs to develop a mobile testing unit that will travel between different carbon capture sites and will be equipped with the latest analytical instrumentation that can measure anything that's coming out of the stack, including any possible pollutants that arise from those carbon capture materials. So this will be a best-in-class facility, and we'll be traveling across sites to track impacts on local air quality. So we're very excited about this development as well. So those are just 3 examples of what we work on in this area. I wish I had more time and could tell you more about our work, but please come and talk to me if you have any other questions about this as well. Thank you.
Okay, and Tracy, we're going to invite you back up as well. And if there are any questions for either of our presenters, we'd love to hear them.
Tracy, we talk about that, but I would love you to explain, about in the air quality measurement, we didn't see CO2, and we're talking about capturing CO2. So I think it will be great for everybody to have track of the CO2 in the air quality, right? Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, I agree with that. So at this moment in time, the CO2 is not measured through this, but we have had conversations, I say we at Lamar University through the Center for Resiliency, to be able to have us basically like a meteorological substation, if you will, that would measure CO2, temperature, barometric pressure, wind velocity, and that way we can, if a pipeline rupture were to happen, that it actually sends a signal through the stand, and you get an update from your phone and things like that. So we are having those kinds of conversations to where we would, if something like that were to happen, we would know.
I'm curious, in your studies, we hear it bannered about that a lot of times part of our problem is the junk flowing over from Harris County and the Houston area. Is there any validity to that?
Okay. My hearing must be getting bad. It's all relative within the wind direction and how what are they producing and how much is coming into here. But that would definitely be a good question.
Hi there. Thank you both for your presentations. If someone in the community wanted to be able to track change in their air quality over time, is that AirNow website the best place to do that, or where would you point folks to?
I mean, if you're looking for your particulate matters and those things, yes, that would be where I would go. You can, it's an interactive map. You put in a zip code and it'll bring it up.
Y'all were talking about co-pollutants and carbon capture. Is it required to have carbon capture to remove co-pollutants, or could we just scrub those out in addition?
We could just scrub those out in addition. So that's like an engineering process that you could just have on its own. We have this polishing system that I showed because we actually want to clean up the flue gas that's entering the carbon capture facility. Otherwise, those co-pollutants will ruin our solvents for carbon capture. So we have to implement that polishing system for the carbon capture unit to work effectively. That's why we added here in the first place. But yes, you could just have an engineering system.
You need one for the other to work, but you don't need...
Exactly. So you need a polishing system for the carbon capture unit to work, but not the other way around.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, I believe that's all the questions that we have for this segment. So let's thank our presenters again. Okay, appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to move into the next portion of our discussion. So like I said, we're talking about safety, preparedness, and emergency response. We got a couple of subcategories. We just went through air quality. We're going to talk a bit about regulations now. And we're joined by folks from two different agencies. One is the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and the other is the U.S. Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, or PHMSA. So we're going to be hearing both from Jay Prothro, and I believe our speaker is Sharon Newman. Okay. All right. So first we're joined by Jay, who is with... Oh, first we are joined by Sharon. We're going to be joined by Sharon, who is a physical scientist with expertise in earth science in particular. I was going to be sharing some perspectives related to underground injection control permitting, and has worked 4 years now at EPA's headquarters, as a physical scientist. So thank you so much for being with us today, and we look forward to your presentation.
Great. Good evening, everyone. So as Manuel said, my name is Sharon Newman. I'm a physical scientist at EPA headquarters, and I work in the underground injection control program. All right. So EPA's authority over the underground injection control program comes from the Safe Drinking Water Act. And so this act directed EPA to develop a program that would protect underground sources of drinking water from contamination by injection activities. Subsequently, EPA developed the Underground Injection Control Program, or the UIC program, which regulates the injection of fluids underground in the subsurface for the purposes of storage or disposal. And so when we're talking about fluids here, what we mean are things like water, wastewater, brine from oil and gas production, and carbon dioxide. Now, the goal of the UIC program is the protection of underground sources of drinking water. And I apologize, this is a slide that I was talking about. So moving on to the next one. All right. So the UIC program regulates a well throughout the entire lifetime of that project. And so the UIC program regulates many technical aspects, including permitting of the well. And for the injection of carbon dioxide, this involves a very rigorous review process. The UIC program also ensures that mandatory reporting requirements are met and also conducts inspections of the site. And both of these occur throughout the lifetime of a Class 6 project in order to ensure that owners and operators are adhering to UIC requirements. Now, there are 6 classes of UIC wells, and these differ by injection activity type. So here, today, we're here to talk about Class 6, which is the injection of CO2 underground for the purposes of long-term storage, also known as geologic sequestration. Now, the Safe Drinking Water Act also establishes a process by which states, tribes, or territories can apply for, and if approved by EPA, receive what is called UIC primacy. And so that's when the state, tribe, or territory has oversight of the UIC program. Now, in all states, tribes, and territories that do not have primacy, EPA will directly implement the UIC program. In Texas specifically, the Texas Railroad Commission has primacy for Class 2 wells, which are for oil and gas production, and the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality has primacy over Classes 1, 3, and 5. Texas does not have primacy for Class 6, so EPA directly implements the Class 6 program in the state. Great. Okay. So the Class 6 rule, is based upon the protective framework of the UIC program and takes into account the unique nature of CO2 injection, including CO2 risk. And this is one of the most stringent regulations of the UIC program. And as part of this, an example of this is that the Class 6 rule prevents the injection of CO2 from leaking outside of the injection formation. And this is done through, for example, through proper site characterization. In addition, it must be shown by the owner-operator that abandoned wells or orphan wells will not hinder CO2 containment, and therefore CO2 will not leak out of these. If there are any orphaned or abandoned wells in the area, that CO2 will not leak outside of that. Now, we understand that many communities are concerned about seismicity, and the Class 6 rule has safeguards that are related to this. So, For example, an applicant must demonstrate the seismic history of the area and show that there are no faults or fractures that are occurring in the area around the injection well, which could possibly lead to CO2 leakage. In addition, EPA recommends that that seismic monitoring be conducted throughout the lifetime of the project. Do it again. All right. So I also want to talk about the Class 6 permitting process. So throughout this process, this is a rigorous review process. Part of this is a technical review of the application in which site characterization is reviewed to ensure that the site is adequate to contain the amount of CO2 that will be injected into it. In addition, the emergency and remedial response plan is reviewed by the permitting authority. A well construction plan, operating plan, and in addition, financial responsibility is also reviewed. So this is to ensure that the cost of the Class 6 project is not passed on to the surrounding community. And the time frame for this permitting is, for the permitting process, we have a goal of 24 months. All right, and so on this last slide, I just wanted to show a few resources that are available on EPA's website. I know this is a long list, but if you go to the website, you can find links to all these resources. For example, there are guidance documents that are available on the site. We do have a Class 6 data repository where you can find information on permit applications, draft and final permits, other permitting information. And there's also links to risk mitigation brochure. And so I just want to end with a little bit of contact information. So here are the links to EPA's UIC website, the Class 6 website, and then also if after this event you have questions, there are also contact information for the Class 6 team. So thank you.
All right. Just a quick note, I do believe that these slides will be sent out to folks. So if you aren't able to capture all these links, don't worry about it. You're going to get an email with all the information.
Hi, my name is Jay Prothro. Some of you I met earlier. I work with the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. Can you guys hear me in the back okay? All right, great. So I want to talk just briefly about what PHMSA does, what we can do, what we cannot do. We establish the regulations or the rules for pipeline operators and how they have to construct, design, build their facilities. We do inspections and audits of their records, of their facilities. We actually go out on site and look at things. We test valves and other things like that to ensure that they're complying with the code. We also do participate in research efforts for looking for new technologies to see how they might benefit pipeline operators, things like that. And we give grants to some facilities or some organizations that apply to help with things that they might need. One in particular that we do a lot of is we've got now a PERG grant, the Pipeline Emergency Responders Grant, that helps provide new equipment for fire stations or firefighters or emergency services that need help getting equipment, and those grants can be used for that. They can be used for training. We really push the training aspect. Because we're talking about CO2, I wanted to put this slide up for you to take a look at. PHMSA under Part 195, and that's the only code reference I will make, has jurisdictional authority over CO2 pipelines, whether in supercritical state or gaseous state. Something to keep in mind is we have regulatory authority and we have safety authority. With gaseous, it's safety authority, but I'll approach that again in just a minute. So, what we can and can't do with respect to CO2, we're not involved. We have no jurisdictional authority over any of the activities that take place outside of transporting the commodity. That's the only authorities that we hold according to what Congress has provided us. And so we can't do anything more than that. So we manage, we monitor, we inspect and audit the pipelines and the facilities of the operators. There are currently about 5,340 miles of CO2 pipelines in the U.S. that we have had. Oh gosh, we've been doing inspections and authorities over since the 70s, mid 70s, something like that. And during that time, things have been fairly safe. This is a picture of Jefferson County, and that's the CO2 pipeline that's currently in place in Jefferson County. Just wanted to give you a snapshot of that just for your perusal. So, are CO2 pipelines safe? Well, if you look at this chart, we've laid out a chart here that kind of contrasts typical hazardous liquid pipelines that we have authority over and CO2 pipelines over the last 20 years. The rate of incidents for CO2 pipelines is just over 1 per 1,000 miles. For hazardous liquids pipeline, it's approaching 1.9 per 1,000 miles. So if you consider that, there's been one significant incident, and that incident happened, and you all know this, just outside Satarsha, Mississippi in 2000, where there was, due to weeks of heavy rain, they've got land features in Mississippi that we don't have here along the Gulf Coast, but due to weeks and weeks of heavy rain, there was a landslide that caused a fracture at a weld, and we had the release at Satarsha. That incident caused roughly 45 to 50 people to seek medical treatment, and about 200 were evacuated. But the other effect of that incident was PHMSA took the steps to start developing a CO2, start developing a CO2 rule. Now, that rule will focus primarily on emergency preparedness and response, and there are other things involved in that rule, and it's expected that the notice of proposed rulemaking will be issued or put on the Federal Register in the last quarter of this year. I want to point out the link there, even in the previous slide. If you want to see the incident report and everything around that incident, if you scan that QR code, I guess you'll have these slides so you'll be able to get access to it. This gives you access to the Pipes Act webpage where you can track what's going on with the regulations. Finally, I wanted to touch on our pipeline, our R&D and research team, and I'd really like to invite Ashley Kroon up, one of my colleagues, to visit with you for just a moment about a specific award that happened recently.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I work in the Engineering and Research Division at PHMSA with Jay, and I'm going to put Tracy on the spot again. Sorry. We just awarded last week, I think the last week in September, these awards were announced. We have a competitive academic achievement program that is one of the branches of our research program at PHMSA. And we awarded this bottom project here, University of North Dakota Energy and Environmental Research Center, characterize expected CO2 specification ranges for various product streams. And that was awarded to the University of North Dakota, but they are partnering with Lamar University. So we're really excited. I led a working group that came up with this topic that we funded, and it speaks to your question about polishing. There's a lot of concern about these impurities, I guess we can call them, that happen in a captured CO2 stream. And so we're really trying to do some research to figure out what we're going to see. But cheers to Tracy's University for coming through on that one. We're really excited about it.
That's not bad, Jen.
Okay, finally, I have a few more QR codes here that would be very, very valuable to you if you have interest in some of the things that PHMSA is doing and some other activities. Other than that, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, and Sharon, if we could have you rejoin. Awesome. Do we have any questions for our presenters? I do see a hand way in the back. We'll get your mic as well.
Hi. How do you ensure, you were saying you were ensure the CO2 can't escape the barrier you were saying that you ensure that you don't fracture it when you're installing the pipeline. How do you ensure that?
Thanks for your question. So during the application process, there's a rigorous review that happens, and the Class 6 rule is built upon the longstanding protective framework of the UIC program. And as part of that evaluation, they are evaluating, the permitting authority is evaluating things like site characterization. So is the site appropriate for the CO2 that's anticipated to be injected into it? Is there a confining layer above the injection zone that will prevent vertical migration of the CO2? There's a requirement to predict the movement of the CO2 plume in the subsurface, and then to perform corrective action and identify any artificial penetration, such as orphan wells in the area that may act as conduits for leakage. There's a well construction plan that's evaluated to ensure that the well is constructed, that no corrosion will occur, that it's constructed with the materials that are appropriate for both the injection fluids as well as the surrounding formation. And there's other aspects that are reviewed as well. After the application is submitted, the permitting authority will make a decision regarding the permit, and if a permit is issued, that's a permit to construct. Now, during that time, the owner-operator is then required to do all this pre-operational testing to ensure that what's going on in the subsurface matches that which was predicted. If there's any deviation from that plan, there will likely be a modification to that permit to account for that deviation. And then also throughout the lifetime of the project, there's testing and monitoring that's occurring. This is required testing and monitoring. And this not only occurs during the injection phase, it also is post-injection all the way up until site closure to ensure that the CO2 is staying contained in the location that it's been injected into.
How can you be sure you have not fractured when you're putting the pipeline down, the confining layer?
So,
because you're a mile down underground.
Right. And so that's what all this testing and monitoring is doing. It's to ensure that things are moving as predicted.
Yeah.
Hello. I have a question. Oh, sorry. I wasn't sure if it was a... my question is, which federal agency is responsible for the oversight and the monitoring, as well as any enforcement that might come from them not following that?
So as far as the Class 6 well and the monitoring wells, EPA and the Class 6 rule has requirements for monitoring. There's also an enforcement component of that and site inspections, and that's done throughout the lifetime of the project.
Is the company that's doing the pipeline expected to be the sole person monitoring, or will there be other sort of third-party independent monitoring?
So the owner-operator they have monitoring wells, and they are doing the monitoring. They're also required to send regular reporting to EPA or the permitting authority, I should say. And in addition to that, the inspections that I described are conducted by EPA to ensure that the owner and operators are in compliance with the UIC regulations.
So it's the self-monitoring, and then the EPA reviews their reports and oversight if necessary. Is that correct?
And oversight, yeah, and inspection.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
So we saw a number of sites in some sort of process in Southeast Texas. Are there plans, be it EPA, be it PHMSA, is that right? PHMSA, sorry, to expand staffing or just having enough people to deal with the increase in pipeline and projects that we expect to see?
Well, I can start by saying I can't really speak to EPA hiring. It's a little bit over my head, but
so that's a great question. Thanks. So staffing has been a challenge. There's no doubt, but the good news is through various mechanisms, we've been able to get approval to establish some incentives for staffing to stay with us and not leave. It's been very challenging because while the work that we do is very rewarding and we've got some great people, you've always got, you know how it is, people are always trying to rob Peter to pay Paul, and so we've lost some good inspectors and good auditors. But what we've done is we've put in some policies internally. Congress, number one, approved for us to increase staffing just a couple of years ago, and they've also authorized the ability for us to help with student debt for people that would come on and stay on and work with us. And then we've also now triggered an incentive program to inspectors when they reach a certain level to encourage them to stay on so that we have adequate staff to monitor. Something that you might be interested in that kind of lies in with that is our inspection process typically is about every 2 to 3 years an operator will have their system or systems inspected. But that is based on a number of factors. One is, are they having issues? Have we busted them for something? Have we had to issue a notice of proposed violation or any other type of enforcement issue? And then they're put in the risk model. And when our risk model spits out its result every year, then we define who do we need to audit. And so if you have been a violator or have had issues in the past, you're going to be audited more frequently. I mean, literally, you could get audited annually. So it's really worked well. When you put all that together, we've built some adequate resources and done some things to maintain staffing. Would you add anything to that, Ashley? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So the Texas Railroad Commission is seeking primacy over Class 6 wells. If they were to be granted primacy, would enforcement component be transferred over to the Railroad Commission for a given project, or would the EPA retain oversight over that project for the lifetime of the project?
Thanks. So just to remind everyone, primacy occurs when a state, tribe, or territory applies for and is approved by EPA to oversee the UIC program. And currently EPA has direct implementation of the Class 6 program in Texas. And so with primacy, the state, if any state were granted primacy, they have oversight over the Class 6 program and would conduct permitting Class 6. But I should mention that EPA would have, I think, what is called secondary primacy. And so, oh, sorry, are people not hearing me? Yeah, okay. So EPA would ensure that the state with primacy is following UIC regulations. And a reminder that in order to have Class 6 primacy, the state regulations must be at least as stringent as the federal regulations.
So does that mean EPA could audit the auditors?
I guess you could say it like that. Yeah. So there's evaluation of how the program is doing.
And then I just have another question regarding seismic activities. So in the Permian Basin, there's been a huge uptick in the last couple of months in seismic activity. So I know you said that there are safeguards to ensure that before the project is begun, there's no cracks and things like that. But I mean, do you all not foresee that the seismic activity that's happening at the moment in the region would affect those potential cracks? And then that along, as well as the water gushers that we've seen in the same region as well.
Yeah, so as part of that site characterization evaluation, like you said, the applicant must demonstrate that the site is seismically inactive and that those faults or fractures are inactive, that they won't act as conduits to any CO2 leakage. In addition, EPA recommends that seismic monitoring occur throughout the lifetime of the project. And so this allows detection of even the smallest amount of seismic activity in the subsurface. And even if it can't be felt at the surface, that would be an indication that, there could be actions that could be taken to prevent any future seismic activity. So, For example, slowing down the injection rate. And I should also mention that there's an emergency and remedial response plan that is part of the Class 6 application and becomes an enforceable component of the permit. That is a site-specific plan. And while we don't anticipate any sort of emergencies occurring during a Class 6 project, we, with proper siting, with proper well construction, with all the things I discussed earlier, we do understand this is the real world. And so we do want an emergency and remedial response plan in place. So that is specific to the site, that identifies actionable items that can take place in order to mitigate any sort of, if there's any deviation from that which is expected. And as part of that, seismic monitoring and other types of actions can occur or can be incorporated.
At UT, we have a bunch of work going on in the Permian with these problems. It's a research group called CISR, CISR, and they have a lot of information. So come see me. I'm glad to share about it. A couple of things to clarify: that those are saltwater disposal wells collected to unconventional resources, fracking operations, right? So they're saltwater disposal wells. So they're managed out of the Railroad Commission, and it's not being managed from EPA headquarters. If the Railroad Commission can't manage it, EPA has an opportunity to step in and say, you're not managing it right. I believe that if you look into it, you'll find out that the Railroad Commission is scrambling like crazy to try to figure out how to manage it, and probably EPA is not jumping on them saying but it certainly, also what happens in the Permian is the Permian. So don't imagine it, what happens there will happen here, because things happen there that don't happen here. So come to talk to me some more, but it's not coming. It's not coming to neighborhood near you. There's a great deal of saltwater disposal going on and deep well injection going on here that's really quiet, and it hasn't been seismically active. You can look at CISR's website and see, be reassured. I almost put the slide in for their website. I should have, for you, to show you how nothing much is happening here. So.
We have any more questions? Okay, say another question, please.
Yeah, thanks. So there are 2 Class 6 wells, or a Class 6 well in Illinois that EPA manages that's been leaking, right? ADM facility, are you aware of that?
So unfortunately, that's an active enforcement case, so I can't speak specifically to those wells. However, we can take a look at the permitting process and how that safeguards.
Okay, so you're aware of it. So my question was, has anything changed in EPA's Class 6 permitting process, given that the wells they currently manage are leaking and the company didn't follow enforcement or notification protocol, monitoring protocol, etc.? So I'm just wondering if EPA has done any sort of internal reconfiguration around permitting, given these new revelations.
Again, I can't really speak to that specific case. However, EPA's Class 6 rule is protective and has a suite of safeguards in order to ensure that the CO2 remains where it's supposed to go. And part of that is that rigorous review process, the testing and monitoring program, required reporting program, and even into post-injection site care and site closure where that monitoring continues.
So nothing's changing about the program?
Again, I can't speak to any specifics about that or
think about the case. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, to be clear, I wasn't asking about the ADM enforcement action. I'm asking about the Class 6 permitting, if anything has changed in the permitting process recently.
Again, that would sort of touch upon that. But thank you for your question.
I was just going to try to get closer to the last question she asked, so I'm good.
What somebody is not regulated, but if you want to gossip to me, I'll tell you a story.
Maybe you can ask you about ADM if you have other questions.
Then you might, when I tell you.
Hi, I'm gonna poke a little bit more. Let's think about a hypothetical situation, not this current leak. If there was a leak that EPA said was not supposed to leak and was supposed to follow the permit, and it didn't happen in a hypothetical situation, who would take initiative to make sure that it doesn't happen again? Because a lot of times we're seeing agency hot potato, where we're in this sort of limbo. We're willing to speak really confident and fully about the promises of this technology, but not really speaking at all to the risks. And so in a hypothetical situation, if another well leaked outside of its permit zone, would that compel the EPA to address the permitting process or adjust?
So EPA's permitting process establishes safeguards in order to take action if anything should occur. So in that hypothetical situation that you described, there are those monitoring and reporting requirements and testing that would immediately identify if there was any deviation from that which was expected. That monitoring and reporting requirement, if it triggered, if there was identified that there was a deviation, would then put that emergency and remedial response plan in place that I talked about earlier. And so that is a site-specific plan that kicks various actions into place that are specific to that site. And identifies local individuals at that site that need to be contacted, be it emergency responders and so forth. In addition, there are site inspections that occur, and so that is also an enforcement component of the Class 6 permitting. Now, I work on Class 6 implementation. I don't work on enforcement, so I don't necessarily we can certainly put you in contact with our enforcement folks. And also, I definitely recommend you check out our EPA website. If you have any questions about particular cases, there's opportunities to provide there's opportunities for information, I think, to provide comment as well. Thank you.
And I'll just say, I know that you can only, speak from your experience. And, I guess I would also encourage the speakers, you're welcome to, at any point in time, speak from your experience and not on behalf of the agency as well, if you do feel more comfortable doing that. But I guess just to the point, I would imagine that these regulations have evolved over time, right? That the processes that are being used now in some way represent some improvement on processes from 10, 15, 20, 30 years prior. Would that be the case?
That's exactly the case. And the list of tools that I put up at the end of my slide shows the number of resources that we've been developing over the years to help to streamline the permitting process, to help applicants to get information out to the public. We've recently developed two different types of, a tracker to help identify the projects that EPA is currently reviewing, as well as the Class 6 data repository, which is a database of permitting information, such as permit applications and draft to final permits, environmental justice information. So we're constantly developing tools in order to help streamline that process.
So given that, then I think it wouldn't be a big stretch of imagination to say that if something did happen and we had to learn from that processes at EPA, regulations, requirements could continue to evolve in the future, right?
Correct.
Okay. And even if that may not be crystal clear in terms of how it would happen, I'm assuming we could agree that that's something that is likely to happen.
I would echo that with PHMSA. We've got a long history of data on our webpage, and you've got the QR code that's in the presentation. You can get to that data, look at it, research it, see what's going on, and then everything else that she said, all of the other tools that we've developed to do outreach and engagement with everyone, outreach and engagement with our emergency services, our operators, the public, our underserved communities. All of that stuff has been developed over time, and you can find details about that on our webpage.
I appreciate that. I know we're over time for this particular segment, but I think that part of what I'm hearing is, in the environment that we live in, the unexpected is bound to happen eventually. And so if there's an opportunity to be proactive about thinking how these changes could occur in the future, I think that warrants further discussion and follow-up. Okay. All right. We do have to move on to our next segment. I want to say thank you to both of you again.
Thank you.
Okay. And just a reminder, too, even after the formal program ends, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so I want to try to keep us moving forward in the agenda. But even after the formal agenda does end, there's still more opportunity for conversation on these important matters. So thank you, everyone. Okay, so the next portion of our discussion here is related to, did we lose track on the, okay, no, I think we're in the right place. I may be working with a different version of the agenda, sorry. But we have Gillian Rosen, who's going to be next talking about carbon storage resources at DOE. So thanks so much. Appreciate it. And this is for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so my name is Gilly, kind of like that bar in Pasadena. I'm a geologist, and I'm going to tell you a little bit today about what we have going on in CO2 storage and a little bit about our transport studies. And because we're short on time, I got notes to keep me focused because I could talk to you about geology for a long time. I became a geologist because I love being outside and I love running and swimming and seeing how the sand that I'm swimming around with turns into canyons that I can then run through. So I look at the Earth's history and this big perspective of where have we been, where are we going? And I've had the opportunity to spend my career in geology, spent 15 years here in Houston working before I joined DOE. And so I've had a lot of time to look at the subsurface and understand kind of subsurface processes and how we think about what's beneath our feet. So Sarah showed this slide earlier. I'm going to focus on the storage piece of carbon management, right? So after the CO2 is captured and transported, we'd like to lock it up somewhere permanent. And at DOE, specifically in the office that I work in, which is Fossil Energy and Carbon Management, we've been doing this for decades. Over 20 years, we started with research in fundamental science and concepts. In the early 2000s, we looked at characterizing the geology and storage potential of different regions and where CO2 emissions were coming from. We then moved to some small-scale projects, validating the regions with the most promising storage opportunities. And then from there, we looked at large-scale projects, where we then we continued to verify and do risk assessment and mitigation processes. And these projects also included stakeholder engagement, validating monitoring technologies, and optimizing operations. In 2016, FECM launched Carbon Safe. And, we love our government acronyms, but Carbon Safe stands for Storage Assurance Facility Enterprise. And it's our program for commercial scale site characterization. And this is an essential step in developing future facilities. So why the Gulf Coast? There's so many reasons. I got to talk to some of you about this earlier. But first of all, like Sue said, there's great geology here, right? We're just really lucky to be on some good geology. There's also lots of CO2 emissions that can be captured here. There's also existing infrastructure and talented, experienced workforce. So all these things coming together in the Gulf Coast is sort of a, perfect complement to why carbon management could work out really well here. So on this figure here, I've got some existing CO2 pipelines. That's what's already here in the community, those black lines. And then we've got the dashed area in blue. That's a FEED study that we've got going on for carbon transport. So essentially, it's a paper study. We're looking at the possibility of expanding CO2 pipelines, what that's going to look like from an engineering perspective. This is not a construction project. It's a FEED study, so front-end engineering and design. It's like a really detailed book report. In purple, we're looking at some other transport options, which would be looking at shipping, right? What are our marine transport options? And then the triangles are carbon safe projects. So you can see we've got a couple here in the area, and I'm not going to talk specifics. We do have some project performers that are in the area, but I'll let them talk about their projects. But just so you know, we're looking to do carbon safe projects across the U.S. And this is just a snippet of what we've got going on here. Okay, so we want to start with the big picture. So for all the reasons I had mentioned earlier, Gulf Coast is a great place to start for these projects for carbon management. The more work we do, the more we can focus down and find those like really optimal sites. And we do that through we get from this basin scale approach, we kind of narrow it down to a few prime areas. We look at some potential sites, and then we kind of go through the permitting process at very specific sites. And so Carbon Safe walks through that process through 4 phases. Phase 1 is what we call pre-feasibility. It's when you assemble your team and you figure out what your project scope is going to be. For phase 2, it's the feasibility of the storage complex. You start to assemble your data. In the Gulf Coast, we've got lots of pre-existing data from earlier oil and gas projects. That's usually a good place to start. And then phase 3 is kind of where we get to the fun stuff. It's like the more detailed geologic characterization. And this is all of the work that goes into the permitting process that Sharon was describing earlier. Okay, we've got detailed geologic characterization, really refining our concepts of the subsurface, developing the models and the data sets necessary to complete that permitting process, which is really intense. It's got a lot of data requirements. You need to model the way your project is going to behave. And there's also a lot of environmental impact studies that are part of this process. Phase 4 is after all of that is completed and all of your permitting is in place. That's when we get to construction. So it's through these 4 phases is how we develop our storage sites. And lastly, I want to talk to you a little bit about NEPA. So this is the National Environmental Policy Act. Now, I will just say I'm not a NEPA expert, but this is how we incorporate these environmental studies into our program. Okay, so NEPA was signed into law in 1970. It requires federal agencies to engage in an environmental review process. So this integrates the consideration of the environment into all the decision making. So phase 1 and phase 2 projects in Carbon Safe don't have to work with NEPA because those are the feasibility and pre-feasibility phases. But once your project is mature enough and applies for a phase 3 Carbon Safe, then you begin the NEPA process. And so we look at a project must meet our readiness requirements before they can start the NEPA process. Phase 3 applications, they contain an environmental questionnaire or an EQ. There's going to be a lot of acronyms here, so I'll apologize in advance. So that covers the work to be done in all phase 3 projects. This can be, over 30 pages, maps describing the environmental conditions at each site where work will be done. Can look at air quality, water supply, protected and sensitive areas, and economic conditions. Typically, field activities require more extensive descriptions than, say, office work, less of an environmental impact on office work. A phase 3 project cannot begin until you've done a NEPA determination. So we will not provide the funding until they've started to consider the environmental impacts. The first finding is a categorical exclusion, or a CX, and that means that all the work falls into a specific category which impacts are pretty well defined and limited. So most phase 3 activities, which is continued characterization, will fall under a CX. There's also an environmental assessment, an EA, or an EIS, an environmental impact statement, and those are more detailed environmental assessments. And so we'll award projects and we can begin to work at sites that have a CX. But if any field work is involved, a project must have all the necessary permits. That means you'll need permission from local landowners and any other sort of local permits that are required for that type of work before we can allow that work to commence. So our award recipients must submit an environmental information volume, an EIV, during the first year. So you've got 1 year after getting the award to submit during a phase 3 project. And this is so that the project can eventually move on to a phase 4. But to do so, the EIV has to cover all aspects of a given project. So from construction to injection operation and site closure, all of this is included in the EIV. This includes indirect effects, such as the capture facilities and the pipelines that are going to your storage site. So you can't have a scope, a phase 4 project that will include things that were not covered in your EIV. So we have an office at DOE that handles the NEPA process, and it's a long process. And so that's why we've built it into part of our phase 3 timeline. There's a a lot more details, but just basically the punchline here is that a project doesn't go through this process of environmental study, they won't get a phase 4 funding. So this is sort of a make or break deal. You have to complete the NEPA process to get federal funding for any sort of action. And I think that's all I have for you today. Happy to answer some questions about Carbon Safe in general. And I think we've got, I think we're good on time. Okay. Thank you.
Any questions?
No. Just to give a perspective, have you added all those timelines? How long does it take for a project to come from the pre-FEED to the construction? You know,
it takes a long time.
That's
yeah,
like 6 years or something, right?
At least, yeah. I mean, the permit process alone can take a number of years. So you start from pre-feasibility, putting your team together. Phase 2, getting all the data. I mean, each of those. I don't think I had timelines.
No, they.
Yeah. So phase 1 can be a year and a half. Phase 2 is like a year and a half to 2 years. Phase 3 is, we typically like to think it as a 3-year project. And then a lot of that work, I'd say phase 3 is the most time dependent on other sort of external factors, because you can't move on to a phase 4 until everything in there has been completed. But as far as how we allocate funds and budget periods, this is the general timeline. And then you begin construction. And it's not till the end of construction that injection begins. And that is, once injection begins, DOE is no longer involved. And there's no requirement to go through all of these phases. If you have a project that's already somewhat mature, you can apply for a phase 3, even if you never did a 1 or a 2. If you have, a project that's really ready to go, we have another little phase that's 3.5, and that's just doing NEPA, because we will not give you money for a phase 4 if you haven't done the environmental assessments. So you can come in and we can help you do the NEPA study if you then want funding to help with the construction. So that's the one thing you have to have is a NEPA to get any money for construction before anything happens on the ground. So you can drop in or out at any phase though, right? If after phase 2 you say, oh, our partners will pay for it from here, then that's up to you. But we do have projects that have done a couple phases at this point.
Okay, I have a quick question, if we don't mind.
Sure.
You mentioned a very long process with a number of different steps, phase 1, 2, 3, NEPA, phase 4, and that's just beginning construction. I'm wondering about opportunities for community voices to influence the way that the project unfolds across these different steps.
Great question. And so we do have one of our community benefits experts here with us today. I don't know if Kelly's going to speak soon, next. She'll tell you about community benefits, but it is an essential part of every phase of this program. You have to have a community benefits plan, and she'll give you all the details on that, but it is part of all the phases. And we're seeing some really interesting projects and community benefits plans that Kelly can speak to better than I could, but it's real fun for me to see how they've been developing too.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Okay. And I find myself sitting down as fast as I stand up. So I'm going to introduce Kelly Romer next, who is program management and analyst with the Department of Energy's Fossil Energy and Carbon Management Program. And we'll be talking about best practices and distinctions between some of the terms we've been talking about, like community benefits plans versus community benefit agreements. So,
perfect. Thank you. How's my sound? All right. Okay. Just Dominic can wave at me if I'm moving around. I'm also going to stick to notes just so Manuel doesn't have to play the music to send me off. My name is Kelly Romer. I'm a social scientist on the community engagement team in the Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management. I support the implementation of the Community Benefit Plan guidance across FECM's carbon management portfolio. So my job in the next few minutes is to try to set the stage for the next conversation about community benefits, and specifically specifically talk about the tools used to deliver tangible long-term benefits to communities that host DOE projects, but also speak to some of the tools that are outside of DOE's purview. So I think it's important just to set the stage and clarify some of the terms that are related and often interchanged, but they do mean different things. So it's important to distinguish between community benefit plans and community benefit agreements, CBPs and CBAs. So community benefit plans are really specific to the U.S. Department of Energy's project funding requirements. These plans are developed by projects that explain how they will engage with community and labor stakeholders and address the 4 community benefit plan priority areas, which I'll expand on more in a moment. So formal community and workforce agreements like CBAs are encouraged as possible outcomes of community benefit activities. Community benefit agreements are negotiated legal agreements between project developers and a community group or coalition. These agreements often outline roles and responsibilities and identify mechanisms for delivering community benefits that are legally binding and enforceable. So let's dig into these a little bit more. Community benefit plans are a set of plans to address the social impacts of DOE-funded projects. So they're submitted as part of a project's application package and scored in merit review alongside the technical and financial elements in a funding application. So these plans are reviewed by experts with subject matter expertise in environmental justice, labor issues, DEIA, and community engagement. So these plans can represent up to 20% of an overall score in a participant's application. And so this means that the quality of these plans is really important to those funding decisions. CBPs are monitored throughout the duration of the project, and public summaries of these plans are posted as soon as they're available on the DOE website. So what is included in these community benefit plans? So they must address 4 priority areas and describe a project's plans to conduct early and robust engagement with community and labor stakeholders, create high-quality jobs and invest in workforce development, advance diverse and equitable participation in employment and other economic opportunities, and implement the Justice 40 initiative to ensure that project benefits are directed to disadvantaged communities and that the disbenefits are mitigated. So as Gilly mentioned, the community benefit plan framework is applied across technology types and phases. Community benefit plan activities, like the technical aspects of the projects, should be designed to build on the work from previous phases or be laying the groundwork for future phases. So what we see in some of these earlier phase projects that do not include construction is plans that are outlining their approach to dedicating time and resources to conduct the research and analysis needed to understand the project area, understand the needs, identify gaps, conduct that early engagement with community and labor stakeholders, have those initial conversations about what workforce needs or project labor agreements might look like, establish those two-way engagement mechanisms. So how will community input be integrated into the process? So we want to see where there are opportunities for public input to influence the design or implementation. We're seeing a lot of development of community advisory boards and committees. It's also just so important that this work happens early in project development, because developing those strong agreements that reflect authentic relationships and community priorities takes time. So I just wanted to take a brief moment to talk specifically about the Justice 40 initiative and what that means for community benefit plans. The Justice 40 initiative is a policy that directs 40% of overall benefits of certain federal investments to flow to disadvantaged communities. All of DOE's carbon management programs are covered under the Justice 40 initiative. The benefits that count towards Justice 40 focus on decreasing environmental exposure and energy burden, increasing access to economic opportunities, and increasing environmental and energy resilience. So what this looks like in practice is that every application must have a Justice 40 plan that includes a description of all communities that may be affected by the project, including an energy and environmental justice assessment that characterizes the existing and cumulative burdens experienced by these communities. And so to characterize these burdens, DOE has developed the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool that identifies 36 indicators at the census tract level to be able to characterize both environmental, climate, and socioeconomic burdens. The EPA's Environmental Justice Screening Tool is also a resource for assessing the existing burdens faced. And, we encourage projects to use other state tools to inform, a robust assessment here. So in addition to identifying those impacted communities and existing burdens, the Justice 40 section needs to describe the potential benefits, how they are aligned with community priorities, and how they'll flow to communities. So now that we've talked about CBPs, let's dig into the community and workforce agreements. And so while these agreements are not, these agreements between projects and communities are not required as part of DOE funding, they're strongly encouraged and seen as the gold standard outcome of community benefit plan activities. We want to see that the commitments are formalized into these long-term agreements to ensure that these benefits and the responsible terms of engagement will continue beyond DOE's role in the project. So there are several types of agreements that could be used in addition to CBAs: good neighbor agreements, project labor agreements, community workforce agreements. So they can be used for different applications, but they often articulate the roles and responsibilities, processes for soliciting community input and sharing information or data, workforce development, job quality standards, local investments in community infrastructure, community benefit funds, as well as articulating revenue sharing opportunities. So I just wanted to take a moment to share an example of a recent carbon management project that has a community benefit and dividend agreement. This is not a DOE-funded project. It's not endorsement of the project, but I think it's really important to look at examples of these formal agreements. So this example is for the Trailblazer carbon dioxide pipeline in Nebraska, which recently received permission from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to transition the pipeline to carry and transport carbon dioxide from ethanol plants for underground sequestration. In April, Tallgrass Energy entered into this agreement with Bold Alliance, which is a coalition of organizations and associations across the region. It is also endorsed by 11 additional organizations that represent agricultural producers, first responders in the area. This agreement focuses on 3 specific categories: landowner protections, public safety, community investment. And this CBA establishes provisions for landowners to receive annual royalty payments, as well as a community foundation to receive an annual endowment based on the total amount of carbon dioxide the project sequesters. The CBA also provides funding for first responder equipment training, improvement of the public safety alert system, strategy for continuous engagement with those local emergency planning committees. And importantly, the agreement outlines terms for communication with landowners, how to navigate conflict if it arises, and options for decommissioning once the pipeline is no longer needed. So it's not a DOE project, but it is a useful example of the type of agreements we like to see as outcomes of community benefit plans that reflect community goals and priorities. So this agreement is published online. That QR code will take you to it. You can read it. And the perspective from the community organization is also linked here, so you'll be able to review that with the slides. So lastly, I want to conclude with to speak to a few of the relevant initiatives happening at the Department of Energy. First, I want to talk about the U.S. Department of Energy's Responsible Carbon Management Initiative. This initiative aims at encouraging project developers and others in the industry outside of DOE-funded projects to pursue the highest levels of safety, environmental stewardship, accountability, community engagement, and social benefits in carbon management projects. So we announced this initiative in August 2023, solicited input through a request for information, received over 80 thoughtful comments, and these comments were integrated into the principles as well as the set of resources provided to, as best practice and resource guides of how to implement these principles. So we see this as an important component of DOE's role in supporting the responsible carbon management in a way that is responsive to environmental justice concerns. And lastly, I want to speak to the Regional Energy Democracy Initiative. So in Louisiana and Texas, there are, beyond carbon management, there are a lot of DOE projects happening in the region. Recognizing that there is a need to support community and stakeholder involvement, understanding, and capacity with respect to the community benefit plans, DOE, led by the Office of Energy Justice and Equity, is launching the Regional Energy Democracy Initiative. So this will be a regional consortia with diverse representation of labor groups, legal support, economic development, community groups, in order to provide expertise and training, technical resources, and support to communities that may be hosting projects. This consortia will develop a regional benefit strategy that outlines this region's priority areas of, where they would like to see investments, needs, and concerns. This will also be a one-stop shop for tracking DOE investments in the area. So would love to just flag the QR code in the right there to stay tuned for an exciting announcement, hopefully coming later this fall. And stay tuned for the notifications about potential convenings in the dashboard. And I think it will be an exciting and relevant initiative for this group. Lastly, again, here's some resources that were also linked on previous slide, but resources for community benefit plans. We do have a lot of expertise in the room, I'm sure, so there's an opportunity to be involved in the merit review process across DOE's portfolio, as well as DOE support for developing community benefit agreements. With that, I will conclude. I'd love to take some questions.
I'll always have a question. Yeah, thanks. My biggest concern is around free, prior, and informed consent in siting of these projects. Mostly, it's my understanding that communities don't know about, don't have enough information, and haven't consented to these projects. How does that fit into this process at all?
Thank you for the question. I read every comment from the Responsible Carbon Management Initiative, and consent and accountability were two of the priorities that came up so regularly. Let me know if I'm staying too close to something. So their consent is not formally built into the structure of the federal funding process. That said, early engagement and providing that information is fundamental to the implementation of the community benefits plans. That's why we want to see those two-way engagement processes at every stage of the project phases, in as early as R&D, in order to, solicit that input early when there are opportunities to make changes or adjustments and better understand the local context if this is the right location for this project. Community input is really important for how we, factor in and evaluate success of the community benefit plan implementation. That information is used to inform go, no-go decisions or inform future funding decisions. So we do take it very seriously, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity as a social scientist to talk about what consent looks like at the community level, because every context is different from what that would look like. So thanks for that question.
I do have a follow-up. I'm curious about, is there, DOE releases a funding opportunity and people apply for funding in response. The funding opportunities all have requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to take feedback from the community that's received now and build that into the requirements for future opportunities so that there's more of a tie-in between the expectations that are communicated, and what the community wants?
Yes, I think about that in two ways. First, through events like this, we take what we hear very seriously and we integrate it into our guidance, and we bring it back to the project teams, and we integrate it very continuously into our training materials and the resources that we provide to applicants. The second piece is a way we monitor projects in FBCM through a process called assistance and validation. So after an award is made, the project has to present their community benefit plan, opportunities, challenges. What are the specific steps that they're going to take? Different phases have a beginning, interim, and final assistance and validation review. This is an opportunity to share what they're learning from their early engagement, if changes need to be made based on the activities and the feedback they're getting. And that's an opportunity for us to take what we hear, integrate what they're learning, and make sure that that community benefit plan is a living document and is able to adjust as needed.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Well, Kelly, thank you so much. Appreciate you. Presentation. And the next portion of our agenda is going to be facilitated by Sanrisa Lucero, who is a special advisor for stakeholder engagement with DOE's Office of Energy Justice and Equity.
All right. How's it going? You guys still awake? Still awake? It doesn't sound like it. Give me some kind of, I'm awake. I'm trying to be awake. Trying to be awake. Okay, we got those. All right. Well, I'm going to introduce our conversation for the night. So no more talking at you, no more slides. We're going to have a number of different folks come up, and we're going to discuss about developing these benefits with and in partnership with communities, and hearing a little bit about their concerns. So and if our panelists can come on up, we're going to be two chairs short, and so Emma's going to help us grab those. And thank you, Emmanuel. Actually, we're going to be one more chair short too, because I'm going to come and join everybody. Here. All right. So while our panel is getting settled, and we'll have, I think, a few mics short, and so we'll just share some of those among our crew here. Okay, good. So we got 4 mics. All right. Just watch for feedback with each other, making sure we don't pick up too much. And actually, do you mind scooting down just one, and I'll grab the end. Okay, thank you. All right. So because we're all in a different order here. When I introduce you, if you don't mind just raising your hand, giving a wave, a woohoo to the crowd. So we have Randy Harris, who's the director of the Midwest region for LIUNA, I believe. Woo? Are you there, Randy? Give us a woohoo.
Yes. Hi. Thank you for the introduction and thank you for the opportunity. My name is Randy Harris. I'm an international representative for the Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA. You've probably seen orange shirts and signs and things everywhere out at events. We have, the boss said this morning, 540,000 members in the United States and Canada, so that's the number I'm going to use. We have a pretty good chunk of folks down here in the Gulf Coast area. I work out of our Midwest region. When I get down to Texas, folks like it when I say the Midwest region because you're not in the Midwest, of course, down here in Texas, but that's the way we define it. But no, we cover 10 states out of our office. We have about 55,000 members in our 10-state region. And we do any number of projects, and I'm excited just to chat with everybody here tonight.
Awesome. Thank you, Randy. And then we have Mr. John Beard, who's the founder, president, and CEO of the Port Arthur Community Action Network. John, do you want to say just a sentence or two? Intro?
Yes. First of all, let me say good evening to everybody. I hope everybody's awake. You tried to wake them up earlier. I know I've been sitting quite a while, and this can get to be a bit dense, all of this talk about carbon sequestration and all of that. But it's a very interesting time, especially for Southeast Texas and for the communities in general. But as Sonrisa said, I'm the founder and CEO of an environmental, social justice, and community development organization based in Port Arthur, but also in Southeast Texas. And it's called Pecan, and it's spelled with an A, not an E, because if we use the E, then you all would think we're a bunch of nuts, and we're not nuts. But we do believe in environmental and social justice. We do believe communities can be made better and stronger by having agreements that are feasible, workable, and practical so that the rising tide lifts all ships. Everyone gets help. Everyone has an opportunity, and also that we have a clean, safe, and healthy environment for all.
Thank you, John. And Dominic Chacon, he's our Houston Regional Coordinator for the Texas Campaign for the Environment.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dominic. I am a Houston Regional Coordinator with an organization called Texas Campaign for the Environment. We're a statewide org that is trying to stop the expansion of oil and gas in Texas. Emphasis on expansion. I know I triggered a lot of people with talking about that, but I just want to enter this conversation in good faith. We're here to explore about what community benefits are. And I'm also wearing this button with the reason, my presence is not consent, right? I want to be sure that you all understand that I'm not speaking on behalf of any community. I'm simply representing a sort of alternative perspective, and I just want to be transparent with that with you all so we can have an honest discussion. Thank you for having me.
I think it's important that you say that because I think being able to have a dialogue with all the different sides of any issue makes us all stronger and better, and I don't think we should be running away from that kind of disagreement, and I think it's actually important that we work through the disagreements that we have and find ways that we can still work for it. So thank you for being here and for making that point as well. And we also have Bob Dickinson, who's our Director of Transportation and Environmental Resources for the Southeast Texas and Regional Planning Commission.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. Our agency, I work for the Southeast Texas Regional Planning Commission. We work for the local elected officials in 4 counties, Jefferson, Orange, Hardin, and we just recently added Jasper County to our Regional Planning Commission area. We work on a lot of different issues in our region. I work with transportation planning and environmental issues. I work on regional solid waste management, and we work on air quality issues. But I think it's very good to have a meeting like this, and I think it's very positive.
Thank you so much. And last but definitely not least, we have Mr. Fred Jackson, who's the staff attorney for the Jefferson County Courthouse.
I appreciate being here. Mr. Beard knows our office. Any project like this, if any support is going to be required from the county government, it's going to have to be approved by the entire commissioners court by vote. And just like with our abatement agreements, we require local hire, local buy as much as possible, and we require reporting on that to assure it. We try to take advantage of the opportunities where there's going to be benefits from the operators and builders of these projects who will donate to the communities, and certainly we look forward to that. We're interested in a clean, more diverse type of industry in this area because through our lifetimes, I'm 76, and I grew up around these refineries with the smoke and the fumes and the stink and the dead water. And now that we're having an opportunity to see cleaner projects come in that do benefit the community, our local workforce, building new homes, supporting our schools, all of this is factored in. But I said when I first spoke in the beginning that the entire Commissioners Court is going to have to be satisfied that the construction and operation of the projects like this are going to be safe. And I was here to gather information. I'm very much interested in it. I did some research on my own before I came here, and I'm not here to speak for the court to say that we're approving or going to approve this project, but to gather information to take back, which I will share with them. And I appreciate the information. Thank you.
Thank you so much. As we saw in the presentation by Kelly just before, there's different aspects of the community benefit plans process that DOE was trying to implement and to make sure that these projects are best in class, not just here nationally, but globally. And I kind of like to characterize it in a few main sections. One is to protect communities, making sure that we're identifying potential harms and how they're being mitigated, identifying, making sure that communities are being engaged in the process overall, both for the protections, but then also for the co-development of the benefits that they would receive from the project that is being that they are hosting. And then finally, trying to move some of that accountability from just only being DOE being able to remove funding or some of the enforcement of the regulations being violated or something, as we heard earlier with EPA and PHMSA, but also if the benefits, having some accountability for that and moving that into a legally binding agreement directly with the community or the labor force rather than just the than just with the DOE. So the first question I really want to kind of lift up, and I think you just spoke to it a little bit there, Mr. Jackson, is about that protection. And Dominic and Mr. Chacon, I know you brought that up a little bit as well. What are you looking for in the protections for the communities, or how are you going to be able to determine what is safety or for a project coming in?
The permitting and the oversight of the construction are very, very important. Okay. We want to, as much as possible, not have to face some unintended consequences that could have been foreseen. Okay. And safety is primary around here. And whenever something new comes up, I've been around long enough to see a lot of new things coming along, and especially the cell phone, the computer, and all of that. But we want to assure safety first. And then, if we see that it is proven that it's going to benefit the community economically and otherwise, we're all for it.
Thank you. Dominic or John, do you want to add anything on safety?
Yeah, for me, I think to have that conversation in good faith about what safety is, the community needs to know what the safety concerns are. And as the current processes are put forward, the community is in the dark. I would say part of that process is just a lack of engagement. I know that we're here doing these sort of workshops to change that, right? But I think looking around the room, it's safe to say that not a lot of the community, not a significant proportion of the community is here tonight, right? So how can they possibly truly understand the safety concerns? It's going to take another person like myself or John Beer to go out and do that work. And that takes time, that takes effort, right? And so if we want to have the conversation about safety, we need to have transparent information. And not only is there that barrier of engaging, right? How do we get in contact with so many people across a huge area like Texas? But we need to confront the transparency as it comes from industry. I have been on DOE meetings when there is a specific ask for the research. Show us where the rubber hits the road. Show us the technology behind carbon capture and how it's going to work so we can share it with the public. And that transparency turns into intellectual property. Suddenly that information is not accessible. And so by that setup, how can we get prior and informed consent with community, right? What I don't want community benefits agreements to be is how much do you want? How much can we pay for you? How much do you think you need for your safety of your family? That is not a community benefit agreement. I think another important thing we need to discuss is who is considered the community, right? There's so many different projects. How can we go to a community and say, hey, this is happening in your neighborhood? We don't know it's happening in your neighborhood in a clear amount of time. And we need to also define what a benefit is, right? If a company is giving money to a college so that the college trains workers for that company, that's an investment for the company, not a benefit to the community. Sure, there are secondary benefits, but at the end of the day, the company's coming out on top, right? And so I think if we want to have these conversations around safety in good faith, we need to be as transparent as possible and take all the time necessary. Thank you.
Yeah, you opened up a lot with that one. Which is, this is great. But let me come back to a couple of those themes, but I wanted to hear John real quick, and then we'll keep going.
Well, being someone, the second generation petrochemical worker, second generation also union steward, working in unions, the key thing of all of this lies in actually being safe and working safe. That has to be the priority on the job as well as in the community. What's in the environment should not affect people that are living in the community. They didn't sign on for that. They signed on to live in a safe, clean, and healthy environment. So, as Fred said earlier, we have to make sure that we avoid any of those problems or those unforeseen challenges that come up. We have to see them. We have to know, because reacting after the fact is not reacting at all. It's not even planning or preparing at all. So there has to be direct engagement with the community, and there has to be some accountability all along that chain, from the permitting to the granting of these opportunities and these agreements that are going to happen on the county and even city level and even state level. And then there has to be accountability in the community for being able to communicate and make sure that those things are met. Or in other words, someone has to watch the watcher. You can't simply just leave it up to the company or leave it up to the county. We all have to be engaged in that process to make it work, to make sure the benefits occur to the community as they should, and that the community is protected. Because I can name too many instances of where things have happened, and that hasn't been the case. I want to ask this question, and I thought about it in the back. How many of you have ever been involved in an industrial incident where you had to evacuate your home or leave the area for a while? Look around your seat. Very few hands. As a community member and as someone that's worked in the plant, it doesn't happen often, but it only takes one time. We don't want that one time. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you there. Thank you for that. And I'm going to try and do a magical pivot here, which I'm not sure I can do, but we're going to see what we can do. This engagement has come up a lot in discussing both the potential harms and risks as well as the benefits with community. I want to bring your voice in, Randy, because you're representing the worker side of this. And John mentioned worker safety as well. I'm wondering if you can begin with maybe what you're looking for in safety, and then maybe also what's the best way to start engaging with workers about these projects?
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. And I think everybody's made some excellent points here. We talk about safety, and to me, you mentioned safety. It's not just occupational safety. We all know occupational safety. Everybody wants to go to work and everybody wants to come home. These are dangerous jobs. I worked, like my brother here said, I worked in a refinery, spent a lot of time in one. They can be dangerous, but it's not just about the occupational side of that safety that we all want and we agree with. It's also that community and that social safety net. And that's what we want to see. And I think that what the community needs to see is the social safety net that comes with a large employer, a large developer coming in, that these jobs are not just jobs. It's not just an opportunity, not just a job. I mean, I say this a lot in different settings, but everybody in this room could be a job creator. You can pay the kid down the street $10 to cut your grass and you just created a job. We're trying to create sustainable careers. We're trying to create and develop that the communities where these projects go look like, the folks that work on them look like and are from those communities. And so you develop this social safety, the social safety net, that's not just a government handout, but it's people going to work. It's that opportunity, that career path they can build, the people that go to work. And that's the safety we like to talk about a lot, from the training, the career development. These can literally be, these kinds of projects can literally be generational changing opportunities for families. Somebody, a mom or a dad or somebody gets an opportunity to go to work on one of these. He or she gets some training, spends several months or years out on the project, has benefits, has a retirement, ends up with insurance. Next thing you know, son, daughter, whomever sees somebody that looks like them out there on this job. They think they can do it. They get an opportunity. These things change generations. I'm the luckiest person in this room. I've never gone a day without union insurance. My father was a laborer. For me, it's been life altering and generational changing, the opportunities that the people that came before me had. And those are the kinds of things, that kind of safety is what we like to talk about when we're talking about these projects, and why owners and developers and communities should ensure that you're getting health care, you're getting retirement security, you're getting good wages, you're getting all of those, the training, the apprenticeship, the career opportunities that come with these projects.
Well, Mr. Dickinson, I'm sorry. Yes, please.
Yeah.
Of course.
You make good points. And I grew up and worked in a refinery before there was OSHA. I also know that our Commissioner's Court has made great strides in requiring local hire and buy, and the Lamar University, LIT, Lamar Port Arthur, and all of us have partnered in programs to train people, because we're seeing these young people leave this area and deprive us of their skills. And many of these kids, I call them kids, are in LIT or Lamar Port Arthur on scholarships from these various refineries and facilities that are being built here to try to build the community here and keep people here generationally. And I do believe that over the last 16 years, greater partnerships have been built with industry in all areas, and it's working to our benefit.
Thank you for adding that. Mr. Dickinson, I know when we were talking, Dickinson, when we were talking earlier, I know you were hopeful about some of the opportunities that carbon management can bring. I'm wondering if you can speak to that a little bit, especially from your view with the Planning Commission.
Right. What we were talking about earlier, and to echo what Fred was saying, it's not just like Jefferson County. There's a lot of the counties. There's other counties like in our region, Jasper County, Newton County, Tyler County, and Liberty County. All of those counties have the same type of sediment, and it would be conducive for potentially some of these carbon capture and storage projects. And the thing I like about the concept, depending on where it might be, but in these rural areas especially, if you can reduce emissions, if you can improve the air quality, but more importantly, if you can create jobs like the gentleman was saying, not just a job, but a job that will be a career that pays good money and good benefits, you can bring benefits to these rural areas and try to keep those younger people, they're working through our LIT, Lamar State College Orange, and Port Arthur. But more importantly, what those projects would do, they would put property and infrastructure improvements on that property on the tax rolls, and that would give these rural counties more tax dollars to help, because a lot of these rural counties, they don't have a lot of they need all the help they can get. So I just see that some of these things, not just, we talk about Jefferson County and Beaumont and Port Arthur, but there's a lot of these rural areas that could benefit from these potential kind of projects too, to serve their citizens. Because what we need in East Texas, I've always said, we have a lot of land, water. We just need more people, all the way from here all the way up to Texarkana. We need more people. So it's not just the urban areas that can benefit from these kind of potential projects, but also the rural areas as well.
Thank you. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of jump in on that and kind of second that. From the union groups that we've worked with, we hear a lot of that they want less promises around short-term construction jobs and more promises around long-term career jobs that are hiring local people, which requires apprenticeships and kind of training, right? But another thing we're kind of seeing, my organization, we conduct some tax studies across counties in Texas to kind of push back against that point that these businesses would then bring tax revenue. The opposite is true. In studies that we've done in Brazoria County and the Coastal Bend, we found that local taxing agencies are foregoing tax revenue from these companies under the guise of them promising jobs. But those promised jobs 9 times out of 10 do not manifest, and when they do, it's not the total promised jobs. And so I think that's something that we really need to consider when we're talking about community benefits agreements and plans, is how do we make sure that there are not these loopholes that allow for these industries to sort of divest from the community. And these studies in Brazoria, we found that there forewent over $2.1 billion, and in the Coastal Bend, over $2.6 million. We're conducting one right now in Harris County in Houston with similar findings. But that's, I think, just a narrative that we kind of have to cut through, and I think community benefits might be an opportunity for that.
So at the risk of bumming out a Tuesday night talking about tax policy, I want to hand it over here to Mr. Jackson. I think there's some different opinions.
To respond, there is a lot of blowback whenever the court grants an abatement.
You can, Mike.
And
if you don't mind lifting your mic just so you can.
If anybody's interested, before the court ever considers or approves an abatement, there's an economic impact study done that shows for the dollars abated, the dollars that are being spent otherwise within a community, housing, shopping, school districts, whatever. Okay. Next, in this county, and I know what Brazoria County and others are doing, we've got a lot of abatements on the books right now. We've got some rolling off. So that tax money's coming back in. You're sacrificing here to get the project that's going to employ people for 20, 30 or more years. Okay, so there's a give and take there. But we require quarterly reports to mandate that they prove that they're buying locally and hiring locally. And that information's available. Now, other counties do what they do, but I can just tell you that our Commissioners Court, first and foremost, is very careful in this process. And whether it's carbon capture or a new clean ammonia or whatever it is, if there's going to be an abatement, they're going to have to prove there's going to be a positive offset economically. Okay? So your point's well taken. And it may be that there are sacrifices in them paying the taxes for a while on that property, but if they're going to employ, however many people, and that structure is going to operate for 30 or more years, the long-range benefits to the employees and the citizens of this county really offset it. And so, it's like buying a car or anything else. You get a new car, but you got to pay for it. Okay?
Thank you. And John, I know you always have a lot to say about this topic.
Yes, I do. And not to be confrontational or adversarial, let's look at that. Let's look at the tax abatements. We have to have a cost-benefit analysis. That's true. And everybody pretty much knows that a dollar spent in a community will circulate 7 times before it leaves. But a dollar that leaves the community doesn't circulate not one single time. And then we also have to look at how many people in that community that's giving that abatement are actually being employed so that that money stays home. That's what's critical. Nobody likes to pay taxes. Anybody raise your hand, you like to pay taxes? I don't see a single hand, not even mine. But we've got to also run, manage, and operate our governments and our cities. And without having that tax base, without having those tax dollars, we can't do it. We can't fix streets. We can't create opportunities. We can't do any of this. And to my knowledge, as we know, Jefferson County's got a little tax problem there, but they're working on it. But it's the after effect of all of those years of abatements. And now we're at a thing now we're giving a 10-year, 100% abatement. We need to do the math on that. We need to see what that is and how much is actually going back. And then not only have it, as Fred said, with them, having reports, but get an objective third party to check the books to make sure you're actually getting the benefit, because you as the taxpayer deserve to know that. You deserve to have an unbiased opinion that shows you that you're getting your money's worth, and that's what we all want.
So here we have...
I just want to mention one thing, and just as an aside, there's a bunch of government employees in here should have raised their hand when you asked about, you like paying taxes? But no, I mean, I think...
He moved on. He said no too fast.
But
I was
think
working on it.
the good thing about this community, and I think what we're talking about here tonight, instead of a community benefit plan, and you're lucky you've got such a strong commissioner's court and do the due diligence there, is to come up with that community benefit agreement. As Kelly said earlier, those are the things that are legally binding. Put those things in writing that people have to follow. And that's what you do. You all do such a great job at the commissioner's court there of putting that in writing. But put all of these things in writing. Ensure that it's not just, they don't just say local hire. This percentage of this work, and we're going to do these things in this community, and we're going to pay this amount with these benefits in this spot, and put those things and let the DOE know those are the kinds of things we have to see here before the DOE should give any grant money.
I'm glad that you said that, because so when you brought up there's lots of debate about what's happened before, right? And what we're talking about now is a potential for a new opportunity that could, as you said, Mr. Dickinson, create a new tax opportunity or create a new wealth opportunity into the area. And some of the concerns from the past, or the lessons learned from the past, right? Or what are the offsets? What is the opportunity? How much of that job stays locally? How much of that comes in from an external location? And so I really wanted to pose this to you, actually, Randy, which was, how do you help have more of those jobs be local? And how does that hiring come from the host community? And it looks like you want to come in as well.
Under our current administration, if you will, we are requiring these new companies that come in here and build to open up for contractors, labor groups, to meet the procurement people up front. Next, whoever we agree to give an abatement to, or even if it's this project, has to assure us that at the outset of procurement, where they're going to buy stuff, they have to bid it out locally, and they have to give those quarterly reports to us. We're busy around here, and we get shorthanded. If they hire within our 9-county area, hiring people, they qualify. If they're going to buy products or equipment, they buy it in Jefferson County. And if they can't get it here, we understand that a lot of instruments, vessels, things like that have to be built somewhere else. We understand that. But another thing that I didn't mention that's part of our agreements is that if someone comes in here to build a plant, they have to order it from the local office here so that the county gets benefit of the tax money, the sales tax. Okay? Yes, right here. Okay? So there's a lot of give and take, and I can show you quarterly reports if anybody's interested, and I can show you where they've ordered something, whatever it might be, an instrument of some type that they can't get here locally. Well, okay, we understand that. But if you've got a local bidder that bid on it and didn't get it, they have to explain why. Mm-hmm. Okay? And if anybody in the community that says, I've been trying to get work or sell something to XYZ and they turn me down, we call them in, open the books, show us why. Okay? If they say, well, your local guy wanted $1 million more than the guy in Houston, well, we can understand that. But if it's close, you have to buy locally. And we've had good results. We had some problems 10 or 12 years ago. We got those rectified. Because when we had the Come to Jesus meeting, then it was either you're going to straighten up and fly right or you're going to lose the abatement. We've got a clawback clause so that if they don't do what they're supposed to do, they can lose it.
So I'm going to do a little bit of a lightning round right here, hoping that we're going to err on the side of lightning, gentlemen. And then I want to turn it to our crowd to be able to ask a couple of questions of our panel. So y'all get ready. You have their lightning round time to think of your question. And the question I'm going to pose is you kind of get your choice of what you would like to answer here. But what I'm hoping that you can say is, what is the one thing that you would like for either most important that you'd like to see in an agreement that would be negotiated either for community or labor, as your preference may be, or what's the most important thing that you think should be happening for engagement and the way that these projects should be engaging with the community or the workforce. And Mr. Dickinson, you've been kind of quiet for a minute, so why don't I start with you?
Well, I think the main thing that if a project's going to be proposed, like anywhere in our region, the rural counties or Jefferson County or Orange County, I think that the effort should be made to inform and educate people about what the idea is and what we're planning to do, and more importantly, here we go. The main thing I think is the main thing we want to do is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of our Southeast Texas region, and also if there's positive things from the environmental, which these type of projects can, and also from the economic side of it. I think those are the most important things. But more importantly than that, I think if a project does move to be implemented, that it needs to be those requirements for the self-monitoring and all those kind of things of a particular project, a carbon capture, and it's a sequester project. Those rules should be followed to the letter in some type of oversight to make sure that those things are being done the way that they're supposed to be done.
Chuck.
Well, for me, it's about the process. Just recently came back from giving testimony for the U.S. Congress on permitting, and someone asked that question earlier, I think over in that area, with regard to permitting and how long these things take. But it takes that amount of time because you have to be thorough in the analysis and make sure you dot all the I's and cross all the T's to make sure that the engagement piece is there. And that doesn't mean just putting something, an ad in the paper or on the Channel 12 or whatever. It means actually going into the community itself. It means doing the hard work to recruit and get the people you need, because I don't think we do nearly as good enough job here, because with all of the economic development we have, we still have a poverty rate that hovers close to 30% in this county. And that's problematic when you look at all the development that's being brought in. As the county judge said, what, $86 billion in development, I think, Fred? So, it's considerable. And it shouldn't be that way if we're putting our people to work. And we can do enough to do that and help our friends in the 9-county region. But I've always been taught that not charity necessarily, but you begin your work first at home and make sure you take care of home and secure that. So I want to see the engagement piece as a process that's being followed, and as you said, being consistent with it across the board to make sure that it actually works. And where it doesn't work, just as Fred said earlier, make the corrections and make it better. But don't just keep doing the same old thing, because if we do, we'll keep getting the same old result. We've got to get better. We've got to protect lives and health and communities and people.
I love lightning round, and I will be very quick. I think we need to see, well, what we would want is a project labor agreement that addresses the wages, hours of work, and working conditions for the workforce, includes full family medical care, retirement security, pension, and training opportunities so folks can advance.
Every agreement the court has made regarding new facilities or whatever is with full benefits. Next, I've been working with Dr. Allen and the Port Arthur School District and LIT and Ben Stafford at Lamar Port Arthur, trying to encourage kids to take advantage of the training facilities. I mean, Bechtel just built out a big training facility in Lamar Port Arthur. LIT's well equipped, but we've got to get kids that are willing to take advantage of it. A lot of the industries around here are paying scholarships for those kids and paying them a salary to work at the same time. But we've got to have people that are willing to just go ahead and show up, and there are opportunities out there, and we're trying to make, even in elementary schools, trying to make these kids understand that an operator or a good welder can have a better income stream lifetime-wise than a lawyer or a general practitioner or doctor. And they can be proud of that job. They can work in a safe environment and have a nice home and vehicles and good schools. This is what this is all about. And if I work with the Corps of Engineers, TCQ, all the time on various projects. It takes me 3 years to get a permit out of the Corps of Engineers. And trust me, if every I is not dotted and every T is not crossed, you don't get it. And I'm very well satisfied that the Department of Energy, PIMS and everybody else, is going to hold everybody's feet to the fire in constructing and managing it. But here again, I started out saying, just want to make sure that the community understands what this is about and that we know it's going to be safe. Okay?
All right, take us home.
I'll try to finish the lightning.
Yeah, don't.
For me, the CBAs are a relatively new thing. I think they're a step in the right direction, but because they're new and because they haven't necessarily been applied to carbon technology and sort of energy projects, we saw a couple carbon pipelines, and there are a few, but most of these CBAs are kind of developed around a sports arena in somebody's neighborhood, and how do we, remedy that harm? If we're doing CBAs for energy projects that have such high risk over such long term, we're going to need multiple CBAs for multiple projects that address short-term and long-term impacts. And we're going to need to have sort of, like, as many people have said, strong writing that gives power to the community to keep them protected, not only in the short term, but the long term as well.
Thank you so much. All right, I want to open it to the audience to see if there's any questions for any of the members of our panel.
I'll be first, I guess. Hi. Beaumont specifically, so not talking all of Southeast Texas, but Beaumont hasn't grown in decades. We know that. Yet we see all of this investment. What are we missing in the engagement part to make sure the benefits that we're getting from this huge investment is actually benefiting the people so they don't leave?
How do you convince a young person not to leave?
I'm 29 and moved here at 24 and haven't left yet.
I know, but I grew up here. I stayed here, but a lot of people so many of my friends that I grew up with left. Well, how do you keep them here? If they're happy doing the work they can get here, making good money, they'll stay.
Let me try to answer that too. I think the Perryman Group out of A&M did a study, and it projected that growth in Jefferson County was going to either be static or in the negative over the next couple of decades. And it's proven true over that same time period you said. What I think is lacking is that we do lack a quality of life. And there's a perception that our schools and our training and all are not up to par and standard, and that our communities aren't safe. If we don't address quality of life issues, then there's no reason for them to stay. And then there's one big thing too, and it's probably going to shake everybody up. Not everybody wants to be in industry. We've got to do a better job of bringing in more diversification, because these plants nowadays don't just run on turning a valve wrench with and all of that. They run on computers. They run on electronics. We need to do more in that case, because there are young people that are interested in that, and they're even going to robotics. So we need to move along with the times, catch up, and move ahead of the times so that we can make Port Arthur and all of Southeast Texas more attractive for young people to not just get a job here, but to stay and live.
Dominic, one quick comments, and we'll go back to the crowd here.
For sure. I think to your point, there's a whole, just like there's a bunch of researchers that kind of talk about permitting, there's a lot of research for what engagement looks like on a community level. I think a lot of it also pertains to just speaking with them and not at them. I think one thing for the CBA process is going to be tender to get people involved, because as it currently stands, it's sort of like a show up and approve our plan, show up and approve the project. There's not really a clear way of them to say, we reject this part or we want to develop this part. And so if we really want to engage people in that meaningful way, we have to put in the time and put in the work.
Thank you. Do we have another question from the audience? One in the corner. I guess that's a corner. It's a corner of the floor.
Yeah. The question about why are we losing our youth? I think that this part of Texas and South Louisiana are kind of under the same situation, that the young people are leaving because they don't see much of a future due to climate change, right? Because of the extreme heat, the hurricanes, the poor air quality, the industrial fires, and the perpetuation of dangerous jobs like these. So my question around community benefits really has to do with intergenerational benefits and risks. Looking at these projects, we know that the majority of the jobs are going to be temporary construction jobs, but the infrastructure will be permanent and intergenerational, passing on those risks to our children, whereas only a few people are going to reap some of the temporary benefits of the present day. So how do we balance that sort of temporal justice consideration for our future?
Yeah, I just want to say I reject the notion that they're temporary jobs. That's a phrase people use to undermine and belittle construction work. Construction is a full-time career. Construction, a job, is no different than being a doctor or a lawyer. You go from job to job to job to job. When you're a lawyer, you take a case. You take that case. That doesn't make it a temporary job. It's these people's careers. It's what they do every single day. I mentioned these kinds of opportunities give people in these communities generational opportunities to learn a craft, to learn a skill, to stay in these communities, raise a family in these communities, and pass that knowledge and work ethic and everything on to the next generation, which also then becomes a trade worker or something in the construction industry. So I would say that that's the first part of that when we're starting to talk about the temporary notion of that they're not temporary jobs.
I'm going to take a little bit different view on that, simply because we are in an energy transition. Fossil fuels we are getting away from because of what you just mentioned, climate change, global warming. We're seeing it. And it ain't just the Gulf Coast or the Atlantic or wherever anymore. Now you've got people in Appalachia and mid-America that are being affected, and affected tremendously. So we've got to be mindful of that, whether we believe it or not. Things are happening and things are changing. And the science tells us that what we think we see and know is true. We're really seeing it. So we have to manage that transition. And as I said earlier, create those newer opportunities that are coming online because, yeah, we still got to drive cars, planes got to fly. We ain't getting out of fossil fuels no time soon. But there has to be a phase out, phase down, and a transition. And in that transition, we need to look to the future and other opportunities and create those here. If we do that, then we can do all the things we talk about. Keep our young people here. You know, I've got 4 kids, and I think only one of them's still here. The others are elsewhere. Who wouldn't want their kids to be close to them so they can see the grandkids whenever they want, or they can do that? And if you create the opportunities and you make it safe and good and affordable, then people will stay here and they will live here. I think the best way to find that out is let's talk to some of the young people and see. But we have a future here. We have a great potential. We just got to take advantage of it.
Did you have one more thing?
Yeah, I had one more thing to say is that we were talking about carbon management tonight. We were talking about it as like a whole subject, but really we've been only talking about carbon capture, which is a sliver of the carbon management conversation, right? So all those powerful temporary construction jobs that would be safe and have union access, we can have nature-based solutions and that create a whole jobs project, right? We can reduce our carbon emissions simply by having a jobs program that fixes old infrastructure. Those jobs are ready to go. That workforce is ready to happen. You know, so we are kind of really robbing ourselves from having a thorough conversation about the solutions because we're only talking about the conversation that industry wants us to talk about, which is the carbon management, right? We should be talking about ending the burning of fossil fuels, right? We should be talking about nature-based solutions and other jobs programs that also address carbon in our climate.
Well, I would say those are conversations that we are having and that are being had. That's not tonight's conversation. It's a more focused, narrow conversation because of specific projects that are coming into this region and trying to make it a place-based type of conversation around that specific type of technology. But yes, I think those larger questions are happening. But I also think it's one that we should invite ourselves to be a part of and to be open to tonight too. And I'm going to release everybody to be able to have those conversations and to visit our folks on the back table and hand things back over to our moderator. But before we do that, if you all don't mind helping thank our panel. Thank you so much.
All right.
Back to you, Emmanuel.
Thank you so much. I just want to quickly say thank you to everyone. I know that life is full, right? And so I appreciate everybody taking the time to be here and to be part of the conversation today. There will be follow-up coming. There'll be emails that will be sent, slides that you saw, presentations. I believe the event has been recorded as well. So look out for any follow-up information. Also note that my understanding is that this venue is going to be closing in about 15 minutes. Yes. And so while we do want to, if there are folks that you want to follow up with, I'd say let's try to get connected, exchange information. And I do want to be respectful of the venue as well and the folks who are working here tonight. So thanks so much, everyone.